The welterweight division is an absolute mess right now, and on today's edition of the Lynch List, I'm going to give you my rankings for the UFC's 170-pound division, and this is what it currently looks like right now. I've edited it to make it look all cool on here on the tier list. We've got Leon Edwards at the top. We got Kamaru Usman ranked number 1, Colby Covington number 2, Belal Muhammad number 3, Khamzat Chimaev number 4, Gilbert Burns number 5, Shavkat Rakhmonov number 6, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson number 7, Jeff Neal number 8, Sean Brady number 9, and Vicente Luque 10. I didn't do all 15. It's just too hard to see on the screen. So we're just going to stick with the top 10 here, and I'll give you my list. So I think there's a lot of issues right now. At the time we're recording this, Leon Edwards still does not have his next title defense scheduled. It sounds like it's going to be Colby Covington, but at the date we're recording this, August 25th, nothing is set in stone right now. So we're waiting to see what happens there. So we're keeping all that in mind, and I'm going to use a bit of a criteria here for my listing, and we'll sort of go through the list bit by bit. But let's start at the top and work our way down. So obviously no issues with Leon Edwards being the champ. Everything's fine there. Kamaru Usman being number 1. I also don't have an issue with him being in that number 1 spot. Kamaru Usman lost a very close fight to Leon Edwards. I think people forget how close that fight was. I actually went back and looked at the scorecards for that. You can look on MMA decisions. Leon Edwards defeating Usman, UFC 286 back in March of this year. Majority did pick Edwards to win. A lot of people thought it should have been a draw, and we even had 2 media members scoring the fight for Usman. So when you lose a close fight like that in a title fight, I think it's still a loss, but I think that's got to count for something, right? So I know that technically Usman has lost 2 fights in a row. He was finished in the fight previously, but that was a fight he was winning. So I think Usman remaining in the number 1 spot makes a lot of sense, and he's a former champion. A lot of that stuff plays into him being number 1. Okay, Colby Covington's number 2. It's going to be an unpopular opinion here, but I've always said this. If you've watched my live streams and me over the years, I think if you've been inactive for more than a year, you should be out of the rankings. So Colby Covington's last fight was against Jorge Masvidal, and granted, there was a lot of things going on. There was some legal stuff. That's why he couldn't fight. That fight was in March of 2022. It's been well over a year since Colby Covington has fought. I know Covington's a draw. He's popular, all these different things. And when I say draw, I mean he's a popular fighter. People do want to see him fight, whether they want to see him win or lose. I realize the UFC's in the business of entertainment as well. So I understand the UFC wanting to do Covington against Leon Edwards. But for the sake of this, me being the matchmaker right now, I'm taking Colby out of the rankings right now. That does not mean that that I'm not going to give him a fight here. I'll give you some fight ideas after we're done this list. But to me, Colby should be removed from the rankings. On the same token, Khamzat Chimaev should also be removed from the rankings. Why? Khamzat Chimaev's last fight at 170 was back in April of 2022. He was supposed to fight Nate Diaz. There was a weight issue. I don't want to get into the conspiracy theories about why that fight didn't happen, him missing weight and all that. But the fact of the matter is his last fight was a catch weight. He's not fought at 170 in over a year, and he's currently scheduled to fight Paulo Costa at middleweight at UFC 294. To me, if you have a fight scheduled that's not short notice, and it's in a different weight class, you should be out of the rankings. I don't like this. This is one of the things I don't like about the rankings, is that it clogs things up. So to me, Chimaev should not be in the welterweight rankings. You want to put him at middleweight after 294, I'm fine with that. But for right now, he should not be in the division. So that's where, in my opinion, Belal Muhammad moves up a spot to the number 2 spot. Belal Muhammad, in my opinion, has done more than enough to earn a title shot. This idea that he should have to fight anyone else at this point, I think, is crazy. Belal's been a company man. He fought Gilbert Burns on short notice. He has the win over Wonderboy. He beat Sean Brady. Belal Muhammad should be in the number 2 spot, and I would have him at number 1 if not for Usman being there, because I really do feel like that's how high up he should be in the division. Okay, so who goes number 3 right now? You guys know where I'm going with this. To me, it's going to be a guy that is ranked number 6 on the current rankings. It's Shavkat Rakhmonov. And the reason for that is 2 things. Number 1, the performances that Shavkat has put on. It's one thing to fight subpar competition. And if you look at Shavkat's resume, doesn't have a lot of really quality wins if you look at it overall, right? We'll go through that right now. And it's not his fault, because again, there's a lot of guys who do not want to fight Shavkat. But you look at the run he's had so far here. Since coming to the UFC, he's had Alex Oliveira not in the UFC. Michel Prozeris, I think, is still in the UFC, but not in the rankings. Carlton Harris is not in the rankings. And then you've got Magny and Neal. Those are 2 finishes, very impressive finishes too. We just saw Neil Magny go to a decision in his last fight this past weekend. Shavkat went out there and finished him. That's a big win for him, to finish Neil Magny. And then he finished Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal's never been finished in the UFC up until this fight. And that was a very, very, very big win for him. So I think those 2 wins, because they were finishes, because they were against, ranked opponents in the division, I have to put Shavkat in the number 3 spot. And you guys know how I feel. I feel like Shavkat could step into a title fight right now and be quite competitive. So I have Shavkat in my number 3 spot. Let's get to the number 4 spot. Gilbert Burns. He's had a bit of tough luck the last couple fights, Gilbert Burns, that is. but had he beat Bilal Muhammad, he was going to get the title shot. I think there was no doubt about that. Ended up getting injured in that fight, which again, it's Bilal Muhammad, I'm sure, contributed to that injury, but he did lose that fight and it wasn't close. Bilal Muhammad got the clear win there. But if you just look at who Gilbert's fought in the division for the last couple of fights, especially, it's been a lot of good opponents, including Khamzat Chimaev, a fight that was pretty close, right? A lot of people felt like Chimaev was going to steamroll him. And he also has another finish over Neil Magny, which again, we value finishes here on my rankings anyways. So yeah, Thompson, Magny, Masvidal. Again, Masvidal retired, but lost a fight to Bilal. But again, close fight with Chimaev. That's got to count for something. So I got Bilal in the number 4 spot. Let's get to number 5. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I know he's been in the news a lot. We don't really know what is next for him right now. Was supposed to fight Michel Pereira. Pereira misses weight. Thompson refuses to fight, in part to the fact that, he fought Darren Till a few years ago and Till missed weight and he ended up winning a decision. So, but he's coming off a nice win over Kevin Holland. That was like a fight that, showed that he still belongs in the rankings. That was a very good win over Holland. I know Holland injured himself early, but Thompson sort of took over there and then had a couple losses there to Bilal and Gilbert Burns, and has a win over Jeff Neal, which has aged quite well considering what Neal has done in that weight class. And he has a win over Luque. He doesn't fight that much, but again, 3-2 in his last 5. The 2 guys he lost to are highly ranked. I have to put Thompson in these rankings. And I'm going to put Jeff Neal right behind him. Now, honestly, I think if Jeff Neal rematched Stephen Thompson right now, I think he'd win. I think Neal is the better fighter. I think when he fought Thompson, he was still dealing with some health issues, but we can't look at intangibles like that when it comes to doing the rankings here. Thompson does hold a win over him not that long ago. You have to put Thompson ahead of Jeff Neal, in my opinion. So he's going to be there. And again, with Jeff Neal, I mean, you just look at some of the competition he's fought. I mean, he just fought Shavkat, did go 3 rounds with him, did get finished in that fight. Really good win over Luque, destroyed Luque, and that's a win that has aged quite well considering what Luque did in his last fight. And then had a split decision win over Ponzinibbio. But again, Ponzinibbio was one of those guys that was ranked, was hovering around the rankings, not bad. So I put him there. I know Magny beat him, but again, I think if he fought Magny now, he would beat him. And again, Thompson looking a little better, so Thompson's ahead. Let's get to number 7 here. I'm going to put Sean Brady in the number 7 spot. The problem with Brady is he only really has one good win in the weight class, and that is against Michael Chiesa. A fight that, he clearly won, but I think you also have to look at the fact that he just has that one good win, and then maybe Jake Matthews, but Matthews is I don't think Matthews has ever been ranked. He's been hovering around the rankings. So that's a decent win. He did finish him there, but then he's only got one loss against a guy who I currently have ranked number 2. So I don't think that's a bad loss to have on the resume. I think Brady just had an off night. I'm curious to see what's next for him. He's not booked right now, but I would put him number 7 just because of the potential. And then in the number 8 spot, I'm going to put Vicente Luque up here. Really good win over Rafael dos Anjos in his last fight. Looks like he's still got some life in that division. I think the full-time move to Florida to train at Killcliff has paid dividends for him. And if you look at Luque's losses, Jeff Neal's one of them. Lost to Bilal Muhammad as well. Again, Bilal ranked high. Neal ranked pretty high as well. Has some wins over Chiesa. Woodley was ranked at the time. Chiesa was ranked. Is still ranked. And then just the one loss to Thompson there. So I'm putting him in the number 8 spot. And then at number 9, I'm going to put Kevin Holland here. Again, Holland has fought some really tough opposition. And he fought Khamzat Chimaev on short notice in a catch weight. I'm not going to count that against him. The Thompson fight, yeah, you would have expected it to be a little bit more competitive, but he got hurt early. And he does have a finish over Chiesa in his last fight, who is ranked. That's got to count for something. And then the Ponzinibbio win, he beat him as well. Again, Ponzinibbio hovering around the rankings. That's a good win. So I put Holland there at number 9. Holland currently scheduled to fight Jack Della Maddalena. And at the number 10 spot, I'm going to put Ian Gary here. Again, with Gary, he does have 2 ranked wins now. I believe Rodriguez was ranked when he beat him. Finished Rodriguez in the very first round, and then beat Neil Magny in his last fight in a very decisive decision. But again, I did a video on this. He was favored to beat Magny. It was expected to happen. I really hope. I think the Jeff Neal fight would have been a little bit more competitive, and I think that's where I would maybe put Ian Gary a little bit higher here. But this is my rankings right now. Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, Bilal Muhammad, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson, Jeff Neal, Sean Brady, Vicente Luque, Kevin Holland, and Ian Gary. I think those are fine. Again, Jack Della Maddalena could be hanging around here too. Problem with Jack, though, is doesn't have that ranked win. You've got Michael Chiesa, who's getting up there, coming off a tough loss. There's a few others as far as the top 15 goes, but I think this is a pretty fair list. I mean, again, and then you're probably going to ask me what's next, what they should do with Colby and Chimaev. I'll talk about that in a sec, but I think for the criteria I've gone with, which is you got to be active, this is a fair list for the top 10. Let's get into some matchmaking though. Again, let's pretend that I'm doing the rankings and I'm doing the matchmaking here for the UFC. So let's talk about a couple matchups that I think make sense. So first and foremost, I think it should be Bilal and Leon Edwards for the title. next. I think that's, and again, Bilal's done more than enough. It's a rematch. They have some history. It ended in a no contest. Don't have an issue with that at all. People asking me what should be next for Colby Covington. I think Colby Covington should fight Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns, when he's all healed up, I think makes a lot of sense. Burns has been near the top of the rankings for a while. I think that fight makes a ton of sense right now. And I think that is, a fight that, I think everyone would want to see. I think it would be very competitive. So give me Colby and Gilbert Burns. You could also do Colby and Shavkat. Either way, I'm fine with either one of those matchups. They're 3 and 4. I don't think it really matters who fights who. But there is a reason I was going to go with Colby over him fighting Shavkat because, and I did a video on this, I think Kamaru Usman should fight Shavkat. That makes a lot of sense. I know they train a bit together at Killcliff. You don't have to point that out to me in the comments. But Usman also does cross-training at Team Elevation. Shavkat also trains a bit at home as well. It's not like he lives in Florida full-time. I don't see why the fight doesn't make sense. And this is what we're going off. Usman wants to get back to a title fight. I've heard some people say Shavkat's not that popular of a fighter. It doesn't matter. He's undefeated. There's a lot of hype behind him in terms of what he's done. He has yet to lose. If Usman beats Shavkat, he absolutely belongs back in the title picture. If Shavkat beats Usman, he's beat a former champion. He absolutely deserves in the title picture as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why that fight makes a lot of sense. I know that Usman has called out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I mean, again, if we're going by my rankings here, he's number 5. I don't necessarily think that should get him a title shot again because Thompson's had a few losses, right? Like outside of Holland. So I think, again, taking everything out of the equation, I would love to see Usman and Shavkat, and I think Burns and Colby would make sense. Or you could switch this up and do Colby and Shavkat, but then you got this issue of Burns and Usman have already fought, and they're definitely closer friends, so that wouldn't really make sense. So I'm kind of looking at it that way. The other matchup I would like to put together here is the fight that was originally scheduled. I would do Ian Gary and Jeff Neal. I know people will say Neil Magny beat Jeff Neal, but again, if you look at the Neal that fought Luque, I think there was a much different Jeff Neal than that fought Neil Magny. I still want to see that fight. Neal's tough to finish, tough to take out. Can Gary's striking be enough to get it done? I suppose you could also go Ian Gary and Stephen Thompson. That's the call out he made. I'd be okay with that, but I really think they should just rebook the Neal fight. Jeff Neal fight, that is. Again, they had that bad blood, the t-shirt, all that different stuff. I'd be totally fine with that. And then the other matchup I think they could do is the rematch between Stephen Thompson and Vicente Luque. It was a couple years ago. I think Luque has improved. I think Thompson's a bit on the decline as well, even though he won his last fight. I don't mind seeing that rematch right now. I think that makes a lot of sense. But again, you could go, Gary and Thompson as well. But then Luque, would he fight Neal? No, he wouldn't because they just fought. So this is where I think that makes a little bit more sense. And then the other matchup I think you could do is you do Sean Brady against the winner of Jack Della Maddalena and Kevin Holland. I still don't know who wins that fight, but I think that makes a lot of sense with Brady kind of waiting in the wings here. And, I saw some people say maybe Brady and Gary, but then you're kind of doing prospect versus prospect. I suppose if Jack wins that fight, it's going to be Jack and Brady, which is again prospect versus prospect, but they were supposed to fight anyways. It seems like the UFC is interested in that fight. And if Holland wins, it's a completely fresh matchup. So that's kind of what I'm thinking matchmaking wise at the time we're recording this video. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What do your rankings look like? You can do top 15 if you want, but like I said, it's just easier to do top 10 here. So what do you think of my top 10 list? What do you think of some of the matchups I proposed? I would love to hear from you in the comments. Let's have a fun, healthy debate here. And if you like any other tier list ideas or want to see me do any tier list videos, let me know in the comments. Always happy to hear your feedback. A lot of the ones that I do end up doing are ones that you guys have suggested. This was one, for example, that someone had mentioned to me doing. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.